Elisa Esposito was a girl who couldn't speak, but her eyes and every movement spoke volumes. She lived in a world of her own, confined within the four walls of a small apartment. No family, no companion. Like the ticking of a clock, her life moved in a strict routine. Wake up every morning, do her household chores, go to work at night, and return to that same loneliness. Yet innocent Elisa continued to live her life, without any desires or dreams. Elisa was an orphan from birth. She had been left by the side of a river as a newborn. Someone found her and admitted her to an orphanage, where she spent her entire childhood. Since childhood, she had a scar on her neck, as if someone had clawed it. Doctors believed that this injury had destroyed her vocal cords, which is why she couldn't speak. But Elisa never considered this her weakness. She was self-respecting and worked as a janitor at a government research facility to earn her living. In her entire life, Elisa had only two companions. One was her middle-aged neighbor Giles, who was also very lonely. He was a painter and worked for an advertising company, designing posters. The other was Zelda, Elisa's co-worker, who understood Elisa's sign language and became her voice. This was the 1960s, a time when the Cold War was raging between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both countries were competing to become the world's superpower and constantly spied on each other. The research facility in Baltimore, where Elisa worked, was also involved in secret research. That night, Elisa and Zelda had come in for their shift. Being the most experienced janitors in the facility, they were assigned to clean the most secure rooms. They were busy cleaning a lab when Colonel Richard Strickland entered with his team. Richard was starting a top-secret project at the facility and had brought something with him in a large tank. The tank was covered with a thick glass top and filled with murky water, making it hard to see what was inside. While Richard talked to his scientists, Elisa curiously peered into the tank and placed her hand on the glass. Suddenly, a clawed hand, resembling that of an alligator, slammed against the glass from inside. Startled, Elisa jumped back. Just then, Security Officer Fleming entered and ordered Elisa and Zelda to leave the lab. He locked the lab behind them. A few days later, Elisa and Zelda were cleaning the corridor outside that same lab when suddenly, Richard stumbled out, severely injured. Two of his fingers had been severed, and blood gushed from his hand as he collapsed. Scientists rushed in and quickly took him to the hospital. Elisa and Zelda were not allowed to interfere, so they didn't try to find out what had happened. Later, while eating lunch, Security Officer Fleming came and took them into the lab to clean. Inside, blood was splattered everywhere. Fleming ordered them to clean the entire lab within 20 minutes. Without asking questions, they started working. Elisa found Richard's severed fingers lying on the floor. Strangely, she didn't feel scared or disgusted. Calmly, she picked them up and put them into a bag. Zelda, however, wrinkled her nose and ran to call Fleming. At that moment, Elisa noticed some movement in the nearby water-filled glass chamber. She saw a shadowy figure inside. As she went closer, her eyes widened with shock. There, in the water, was a strange creature, a cross between a human and an aquatic being. Though surprised, Elisa didn't feel frightened. She placed her hand on the glass, and the creature responded by extending its hand toward her. Just then, someone approached, and the creature vanished into the water. Elisa quickly moved away from the chamber. It was Zelda, returning with Fleming. Elisa handed him Richard's fingers and left. The next night, after everyone had gone home, Elisa secretly returned to the lab. Since she cleaned the lab, she had access to it. That night, the creature had been shackled and left in a pool of water. Fearlessly, Elisa sat beside the pool with a packet of boiled eggs. She peeled one and showed it to the creature. The creature emerged from the water, curious. Elisa took a bite to show it was food and then extended the egg toward the creature. But the creature growled, mistaking her for a threat. Elisa backed away but didn't lose courage. Through gestures, she told it not to fear and placed the egg at the edge of the pool. The creature quickly snatched the egg and retreated into the water. Elisa smiled to herself and quietly left the lab. Zelda was waiting outside and informed Elisa that Richard had summoned them both to his office. A few minutes later, they were sitting in his cabin. Richard had had his fingers surgically reattached. He said, "I'm sure you both saw the creature in the lab, the one that bit off my fingers. I captured it from the Amazon River. I don't need to tell you how dangerous it is. It may look human, but don't make the mistake of thinking it is. Stay away from it during cleaning." With this warning, he dismissed them. Despite Richard's words, Elisa began to feel sympathy for the creature. She saw herself in that mute being. The next night, she returned again, carrying boiled eggs and this time, a music player hidden in her bag. She placed an egg near the pool and turned on the music. The creature emerged, fascinated by the melody. It could feel the music. Now, the creature had started to enjoy Elisa's company. She visited every night with eggs and different music suited to the creature's taste. The creature also began to learn Elisa's sign language. Slowly, a deep bond formed between them. One day, the facility's chief scientist, Robert Hofstetler, saw Elisa with the creature. Until then, Richard and the other scientists had thought of the creature as nothing more than a wild animal. But watching it communicate with Elisa through signs made Robert realize the creature was intelligent. However, he said nothing to Richard. The next morning, Robert went to a deserted location to meet someone. A car arrived shortly. The man inside asked for a password, and once it matched, he took Robert into a restaurant kitchen. There, Robert met two Russian men who addressed him as Dmitry, his real Russian name. In truth, Robert was a Russian spy who had infiltrated the Americans for years under a false identity. The two men were his comrades, and Robert had come to report on the creature. He told them everything he had learned, that the creature understood sign language and music. Robert believed the creature was intelligent, and if that was true, it could become a powerful weapon for America. He urged them to steal the creature and take it back to their country as soon as possible, then left. That same night, Elisa returned to the lab once again with eggs, but what she saw shocked her. The creature was badly wounded. It had been pulled out of the water, shackled, and brutally tortured. Elisa grew anxious upon seeing him. Just then, she heard someone approaching from outside and quickly hid in a corner. Within moments, Richard entered the lab with General Frank of the Air Force. It was actually Richard who had tortured that poor mute creature to such an extent that it could no longer even move. Richard believed the creature possessed some kind of magical power that could help their country surpass the Soviet Union in the Cold War. That's why he was torturing it, hoping it would display its powers. But until now, he hadn't seen any such sign. The general was seeing the creature for the first time and asked Richard what exactly it was. Richard explained, "We captured it from the Amazon River. The local people there worship it as a god." Hearing this, the general said, "Even if this creature is unique, it doesn't look like any god to me." Richard replied, "I think the same now. Those tribal people are fools. They used to throw fruits and flowers into the river as offerings to this creature. Anyway, I've tried everything I could to see if it has any special power. But just as I thought, it's not a god, just a new species of animal. It's of no use to us." Just then, Robert arrived. Seeing the condition of the creature, his heart also sank. He asked Richard, "What have you done to this poor, mute being?" Richard responded, "No need to get overly emotional. I was just trying to see what's special about it, but it turned out to be useless." But Robert replied, "Sir, how can you say it's of no use? This creature can breathe in both water and on land. It's possible that it might even survive in open space. Just think, if we could send it to space, we could surpass the Soviets in science and technology." Robert wanted to keep the creature alive and study it, but Richard and the general wanted to dissect it to find out how it could breathe both on land and in water. Hearing all this, Elisa, still hiding, felt deeply distressed. Robert also expressed his sorrow and told the general, "You have no right to kill this creature for no reason." The general, annoyed, said, "See the stars on my uniform? That means I can do whatever I want. Neither you nor anyone else can stop me. So just do as you're told." With that, the general left with Richard. After everyone left the lab, Elisa came out of hiding. She was determined to save the creature at any cost. When she got home after her shift, she told her friend Giles about the creature and about how Richard and his associates were planning to kill it. She begged Giles to help her save the creature. But Giles thought she was talking about an ordinary fish or aquatic animal and believed risking anything for it would be foolish. Elisa then tried to explain to him through gestures that although the creature couldn't speak, it could think and understand like a human. "It considers me a friend," she said, "and forgets all its pain when it sees me. It's the first time I've found someone who doesn't see any flaws in me, who sees only the good in me. That's why I want to save it at any cost." Giles finally sensed the love Elisa had for the creature and agreed to help her. Meanwhile, Robert met with his Russian comrades again. This time, they gave him a device and an injection. They told him, "It's impossible to steal the creature and bring it to our country, so we've decided to destroy it. If we can't benefit from it, then neither will the Americans. Install this device in the facility's fuse box. It will cut off all electricity and cameras for 5 minutes. During the blackout, inject it and kill it." Though Robert was loyal to his country, he was very disheartened by their decision. The next morning, Richard was planning to have the creature dissected. Robert had no idea how to save it. On the other hand, Elisa and Giles had made a plan. They would smuggle the creature out at night in a laundry cart. To make this work, Giles painted the name of the laundry company that collected dirty clothes from the facility onto his van. Using his artistic skills, he also forged a fake staff ID. Elisa told him he had to reach the loading dock exactly at 5 a.m. That was when the staff shift changed. With everything planned, Elisa went to work and waited for morning. Just before 5 a.m., she snuck into the lab. First, she cleverly tilted the security camera upward so no one could see her. Then she began trying to unlock the creature's chains. But just then, Robert walked in. With no other option left, he had come to put the creature out of its misery by injecting it. But seeing Elisa trying to rescue it, he decided to help. He handed her the key to the chains. At the same time, the cleaning staff shift was changing. Everyone had taken their attendance cards and left. But Zelda noticed that Elisa's card was still inside the facility. She realized Elisa was up to something and began looking for her. By then, Elisa and Robert had freed the creature and hidden it inside the laundry cart. covering it with clothes. Robert told Elisa, "You must keep it in water at all times. Make sure the water is salty. It's a saltwater creature." He handed her a box and said, "Mix a little of this into the water every 3 days. It contains nutrients for the creature." Then he said, "In 5 minutes, I'll cut the power. Get out of here by then. I hope you've planned for this." With that, he left. According to plan, Giles had reached the facility with the laundry van. But just before entering, a guard stopped him and asked for his ID. As the guard began checking it, Richard noticed the laundry van on the CCTV monitors. Seeing it arrive so early, he grew suspicious and called the guard. Meanwhile, the guard was about to answer the call as he inspected the ID. Giles had done a good job copying it, but the ink he used gave him away. As soon as the guard touched the card, the ink began to smudge. Realizing it was fake, the guard pointed a gun at Giles and ordered him out of the van. Richard also began running toward the van. At that same moment, Elisa had reached the loading dock with the creature, but Zelda saw her. Understanding everything, Zelda tried to stop her out of concern. Just then, Robert disabled the facility's power using the device in the fuse box and rushed to the loading dock. He shouted, "Hurry! We only have 5 minutes." Hearing this, Zelda was compelled to help Elisa too. Robert saw Giles at gunpoint and rushed over, injecting the guard from behind. The guard collapsed immediately. Giles, thankful to be alive, quickly drove to the loading dock. Elisa placed the creature inside the van, and the two escaped. Robert and Zelda also fled the facility soon after. In this way, Elisa cleverly stole the creature from right under Richard's nose. He had no idea Elisa or Robert were involved. He assumed it was the work of a larger gang. Elisa brought the creature to her apartment. Since it couldn't survive long outside water, she immediately placed it in her pool and added the nutrient compound Robert had given her. But the creature still struggled to breathe. Its condition worsened. Then Elisa remembered Robert had also told her to add salt. She ran and grabbed a container of salt, dumping it into the water. Still, there was no movement from the creature. Elisa became heartbroken, but suddenly, the creature began breathing deeply and woke up. It was now completely fine. Seeing this, Elisa was relieved and overwhelmed with joy. On the other side, when the general learned that the creature had been stolen, he told Richard that if he didn't retrieve it soon, he would lose his job. Hearing this, Richard threw himself completely into the search for the creature. The next morning, Elisa arrived at a large canal. The water from this canal eventually flowed into the ocean. Elisa now wanted to release the creature into that water. But at the time, the water level in the canal was low. It only connected to the sea when the water rose by 30 feet, and that only happened during the months of October and November due to heavy rainfall. Elisa chose the date of November 10th to free the creature and marked it on the calendar. Though that day was still a while away, in the meantime, Elisa took great care of the creature. When she went to work, Giles looked after it. One night, while Giles was watching over the creature, he dozed off. Seeing Giles asleep, the curious creature came out of the bathroom and entered the hall. There, it saw Giles' pet cat. The cat growled at the creature and suddenly lunged at it. In that moment, a piercing scream echoed through the house. Giles woke up immediately and rushed out, only to see the cat had become the creature's prey. The creature was chewing on it raw. When Giles tried to stop it, the creature became extremely aggressive and slashed Giles' hand with its claws before fleeing. Giles immediately called Elisa and asked her to come home. Seeing Giles bleeding, Elisa grew worried, but Giles reassured her that the creature had attacked only out of fear. He then urged Elisa to find it quickly. When Elisa went out in search of the creature, she noticed a bloody handprint on the door of the theater located on the lower floor of her apartment building. She understood that the creature had entered the theater. Inside, she found it mesmerized by a film playing on the big screen. Luckily, the theater was empty at the time, so no one else saw the creature. Elisa calmed the creature and brought it back home. Once there, she tended to Giles' wound. Meanwhile, the creature approached Giles, placed its hand on Giles' head, and then guided Giles' hand to its own head. A blue light began to emit from the creature's body. Giles was astonished. The creature then placed its hand on Giles' wound. Giles realized that the creature was remorseful, and this was its way of asking for forgiveness. Giles forgave it and bandaged his hand. Slowly, the creature began to understand human emotions. It fell in love with Elisa, and she too had grown to love him. Their connection had gone beyond just emotional. There was also a physical bond between them. To Elisa, it felt like she had found a true life partner in the creature. They were both very happy together. Meanwhile, Richard was still intensely hunting for the creature. He suspected Robert of hiding it because Robert had always been against harming the creature. Richard began keeping an eye on him. Robert's Russian contacts, however, believed that he had completed the mission and killed the creature using an injection. They had promised to send him back to Russia soon. One morning, Giles woke up to something shocking. His wound had completely healed as if it had never been there. Not only that, but his hair had grown back, something he had always wished for. Giles realized this was the creature's magic. He became convinced the creature was divine. He told Elisa, who wasn't surprised at all. She had already experienced the creature's magic firsthand. But then came the day when heavy rain poured down on the city, and the canal filled up completely. It was time to release the creature. However, Elisa had grown so attached to the creature that even thinking about letting it go tormented her. But she also knew that if she didn't set it free, Richard would eventually find and kill it. Meanwhile, it was time for Robert to leave the country. His Russian contacts summoned him to a deserted location with all his belongings. Unbeknownst to Robert, Richard was following him. Robert reached the isolated spot, and soon the two Russians arrived. Suddenly, they drew their guns and shot him. Robert collapsed to the ground. They always eliminated their spies once the job was done. But before they could finish Robert off completely, Richard arrived and shot both Russians dead. He then approached the severely wounded Robert. Realizing Robert was a Russian spy, Richard began torturing him and said, "I'll give you one chance. Tell me, what gang stole the creature?" Hearing this, a dying Robert laughed and said, "You still think this was done by a gang? They're not some gang, they're janitors." At that moment, Richard understood it had all been orchestrated by Zelda and Elisa, since only they had access to the lab. Richard killed Robert and immediately rushed to Zelda's house. She was with her husband at the time. Threatening her, Richard demanded to know where the creature was. But Zelda refused to reveal the truth under any circumstances. However, her husband was a coward. Seeing Richard's anger, he spilled everything, admitting the creature was with Elisa. Richard set off for Elisa's home immediately. Zelda, meanwhile, phoned Elisa to warn her that Richard would arrive soon. Elisa and Giles quickly began preparing to get the creature out of there. But before they could leave, Richard reached their home. Fortunately, Elisa and Giles had already left for the canal with the creature. Not finding them there, Richard went into a rage. But then he saw the calendar where Elisa had mentioned rain and the dog. Realizing what that meant, he figured out that Elisa had taken the creature to release it into the canal. Meanwhile, Elisa and Giles had reached the canal with the creature. The time had come for Elisa and the creature to part ways. Holding back her emotions, Elisa said goodbye to the creature and walked away in tears. But just then, Richard arrived. He first knocked Giles unconscious and then shot both Elisa and the creature. But Giles regained consciousness, grabbed a wooden plank, and struck Richard down. He then ran to Elisa, but it was too late. She had already died. Giles cradled her in his arms, weeping. Just then, the creature's body began to glow. It suddenly came back to life. It was immortal. It moved its hand over its chest and wiped away the wound as if it were ink. Seeing Richard get back on his feet and reload his gun to attack again, the creature marched over in rage and, with a single swipe of its claw, ripped Richard's neck open. Richard died on the spot. The creature then approached Elisa. Seeing her lifeless broke its heart. It picked her up in its arms and jumped into the water. Elisa's body began to sink rapidly toward the depths. The creature came close to her and looked at the marks on either side of her neck, marks she had been born with. Placing its hand over the marks, it gently kissed her. The next moment, it moved back. And then something happened that was hard to believe. The marks on Elisa's neck transformed into gills. She began breathing underwater and came back to life. Elisa had now become part of the creature's world. The two embraced one another and disappeared into the depths of the sea. Truly, Elisa's love was as pure as water, unconcerned with color or form, flowing wherever it was guided. It shaped itself into whatever form it encountered. No language barrier could stop it, nor could any social norms bind it. Just as water molds to every shape, Elisa's love reshaped her, and in that form, she found her true love. And with that, the film came to an end.